Hello and welcome to the new Knowledge Exchange webinar series. My name is Michael Guerin, and I am today's host. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest speaker, Bob Haas. Bob's professional career includes time as the lead meteorologist and supervisory manager of weather operations at MDA Information Systems LLC, manager and account lead at Radiant Solutions, and more recently as a product portfolio manager and senior manager of product management at Maxar Technologies. In today's webinar, our focus will be on Bob's career and how he got to be the success he is today. So, without further ado, Bob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Michael. I'm Bob Haas. For those of you that are not familiar with who I am or Maxar, I've been with Maxar and the other company names that Michael named for the last 17 plus years now, all part of the broader Maxar family that has built out into Maxar from where I was hired into Earth Satellite Corporation to MDA to Radiant and now Maxar. Um, Maxar is a space and Earth intelligence company. We sit on the Earth intelligence side with what we do with weather. I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about my career path within the various forms of Maxar over the many years. So,
Yeah, I can never keep track of all the name changes with some of these weather companies.
yeah, it's not unusual, it seems. So
Yeah. So, why don't we start off? You started your career in private sector meteorology as opposed to some of the more common, paths for meteorology, like a broadcast meteorologist not a lot of students, at least in my experience, know that there's this third alternative private sector path, for meteorology. So why don't you, explain how you kind of got into that field and what made you choose that over the other, potential career paths?
yeah, sure. So kind of dates back to when I was an undergrad at Penn State. Penn State had a great program that included things like job fairs, and learned a lot about the different alternatives available to me as career paths. As a sophomore, junior, really started to get a better understanding of what it meant to say I want to go work for the Weather Service, or what it meant to say that I want to go work for private sector or broadcast, or even stay in academia. I think when I kind of looked at all of those different scenarios and circumstances, it became pretty apparent to me that the private sector held a lot of appeal. I got to talk to folks from what was then Earth Satellite Corporation, I believe, as a junior during the summer, and had an opportunity to learn a little bit about what that company was all about, the types of customers they served, and it was very intriguing to me. For me, I went and seeked them out. The next spring when I was kind of wrapping up the undergrad program. And it was, sort of fortuitous that they had a couple of openings that spring, and thus began my journey into the private sector. For me, a few of the key things that I thought it offered, maybe a little bit more so than some of the other paths, were the right mix of challenges, stability, and growth potential. Uh, what does that mean? Well, going the government path, certainly has some of its own appeal, but probably a little bit, maybe less exciting with the different types of customers you might get to engage with and whatnot. At least, from my perspective. I took the comms courses in my undergrad, like many did, and it became pretty apparent that maybe the broadcast path it wasn't for me, or I was at least smart enough to recognize that probably that wasn't really my sweet spot. The NWS path was probably second most intriguing to me, but perhaps just a little bit less so than the private sector. That's kind of how I ended up at what was then Earth Satellite Corporation, and began my journey. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I just want to highlight something you mentioned. I think is really important that you went after Earth Science. You said the spring after the job fair, and I think that's so important to highlight because not a lot of students realize that sometimes you have to chase down those potential employers to kind of like, if you'll pardon my phrase, to kind of get in their face and be like, "Hey, hire me." You kind of
Yeah,
have to
absolutely.
make yourself known, and that's something that you know especially these days where it's, everyone's a little bit more online than normally. That's you still have to kind of, send out those emails. If they don't get back to you, send another one. If they don't
Yeah.
get back to you, then well, don't send out too many. But you know,
Yeah.
uh, you got to
Yeah,
make sure that they see you. Yeah.
it's important to be real and be personable, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
how you'll get to establish some relationships prior to, graduating.
Exactly.
I have, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about some advice, but seek mentorship, and that includes
Hmm.
folks out there that might be at companies that you seek to eventually be employed by. There are different ways to sort of build some relationships even during your undergrad program that you may be able to kind of lean on a little bit when the time comes to come, over onto into the job market. So
Yeah, and I'll kind of do a little bit of a shout out. The Knowledge Exchange is a perfect place for that. We've got you're on there. Dave, our co-host is on there. I'm on there. A lot of other great mentors on there as well that can they're on there to help. So it's definitely a great thing to try to get a mentorship as early as possible in college. As soon as you know what you want to do, of course. You shouldn't, if you don't know what you want to do, you shouldn't get a mentor in meteorology if you're thinking, well, I'm kind of between meteorology and Spanish, or something. You shouldn't get the mentorship too early. Once you know, though, you should definitely do it. Um, so what made you, kind of switching gears a little bit, what made you want to switch from the meteorology side to more of the business product side of this company that you were a part of, and was the switch difficult?
yeah, no, it's a great question. And for me, I mentioned part of the reason for having some appeal from the private sector was some of the challenges and growth potential that I thought it offered, maybe a little bit more uniquely than some of the other paths. I love forecasting. I still do. I'm ultimately a weather nerd at heart. I think like so many are that get into this business. But I also recognize that I kind of knew there was this sort of leader inside of me that I wanted to kind of tap into a little bit more, perhaps, and that I could ultimately probably bring more to the table, than what I was, as a forecaster. So for a period of time, I was wearing multiple hats. I was, leading our operations team as an operations manager, while also, acting as our lead forecaster. For a handful of years. That was a very fun and exciting and challenging time in its own right. But through kind of seeing where there was some additional new opportunity, I kind of went to my management, and kind of alongside them, we collectively decided and recognized that there was some other paths that I might be able to take. My company thankfully supported me through the pursuit of an MBA. I started that in 2015 and wrapped it up a couple years thereafter. And that sort of gave me that extra nudge to really kind of take the leap beyond the weather's the actual forecasting side of weather, and into more so more deeply understanding our customers, what makes them tick, and how we can bring the best sorts of solutions out to them. I think the other question you sort of said in there was it difficult? I
Yeah.
mean, certain elements of it more so than others. I think probably one of the hardest things is letting go of forecasting, right? So for me, I really don't do any forecasting day to day anymore. I occasionally contribute to one of our long term forecasts or something like that still, or maybe play an advisory role to some of the the junior meteorologists and things like that occasionally still. But for the most part, I'm focused on our products, our portfolio, and our customers, and helping our customers solve their challenging problems. So for me, I wouldn't say the switch was ultimately terribly difficult. Though for me, I also would attribute that largely to the people that I work with both then and now. The people that you work with will make or break where you work and how you work. And as Maxar, or whatever we were maybe called at that very point in time, I think the company direction, the company values really kind of set folks up for success. So a little mini commercial for Maxar, as an employee for so long, I think they're great to the people. There are great people that work here. And that makes a world of difference, in finding, a path for, career advancement, career success. So
Yeah, and I've been using the Maxar products myself for a couple of years now, and they're pretty great. Especially the Dynacast. I haven't seen anything like that. So, uh, great tools. But, uh, yeah, I think that's just highlights that you know having a great company and great people to work with is probably equally, if not maybe even more important than getting a job in the first place, if that kind of makes sense. You have to, you can't just go work anywhere. You can't just work anywhere. I mean, you can, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's a completely different ball game if you have people that are willing to support you or people who aren't willing to support you. And that's something kind of, I've heard this story a couple of times from a couple of different people that if it's not working for you, then you're under no obligation to remain in that place, and you
absolutely.
should work until you find some place that is willing to support you and, well, obviously everybody else that works there too. And you found that place, and that's great. Did you have any advice for? I'm just gonna kind of maybe move a little to a slightly related question to another question we'll have later on. But do you have any advice for people who might be making to look that switch to make that switch from, say, meteorology to maybe more of a business side or whatever? Do you have any advice for people that are looking to do that?
Yeah, and I think I think that it's a great question, and I think there's a couple ways to answer that. And one of those is kind of with more of the entrepreneurial mind. I think it's a good way to kind of think about things as far as there are a lot of niche problems out there that are very much directly related to weather. As you kind of seek and discover what those are, you may find your answer. If you're very, very intrigued by solving those problems, you probably have it in you to kind of make that leap into the business side, because it's really all about finding one or finding many of those problems, and then partnering and working with your customers to help them overcome those challenges. You're the weather experts, though, right? So you're helping the customer solve very challenging problems, though you're probably kind of shifting gears from helping them solve their problem by telling them what the weather's going to be tomorrow, to helping shape the product or the service that is going to advise them along the way. So it's a little bit of a nuanced difference there, certainly, but that was sort of what started to really make me lean more towards the business side, was my time as a lead forecaster. I got an opportunity to talk to a lot of customers, and it was really fun helping them solve their problems. Dave, I think, being one of them along the way. And I think that made it more and more apparent to me that I could still do something that was very much weather related, even if I wasn't that individual that was actually creating the forecast each day and advising them on which way the wind will blow. So.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. If you're going to have a product that people are using to, look at forecasts or to look at the weather in general, you should probably have a meteorologist helping to develop that program and to, kind of push it forward, because at the end of the day, it's the meteorologists that have to make the forecast. And if the product that either the meteorologist or the client is using doesn't really work the way the client or the meteorologist wants it to work, it's not going to be a great product. But luckily, it looks like a excuse me, Maxar seems to have got a great product going. So, uh,
And
no, not too many worries there.
yeah, and if I could, maybe just speak to kind of to go back to whether or not that switch was sort of
Hmm.
difficult and interrelated to that. I think for me that my first focus as a product manager was on WeatherDesk, right? Our portfolio of weather products probably also helped to enable a bit of a smoother transition, maybe then kind of a jarring switch to something that was completely not weather related. In my time at Maxar, I've been afforded the opportunity to now focus on some other products along the way as well, which is super fun. I realized that kind of serve two passions, one being weather, the other being sort of the product management type discipline. It very much makes me tick, and I enjoy other elements of what Maxar does with imagery and change detection and things like that as well, just the same. But you know that there's an element of my day to day that still touches meteorology, and weather forecasting, and providing products, to those that have weather challenges is fantastic. That is what sort of drives me each day. So
Yeah, and I think something you said there was just really great, the where you said you had two different passions, one for weather, one for this product management. And I think that's something that is just really important to highlight because a lot of people, at one point myself included, we get kind of stuck in this thought that, oh, I went to college for meteorology or I went to college for whatever, and it doesn't really matter. And I have to get into that field and stay in that field. But that's not necessarily the case. If let's say I like doing baseball statistics or something, and I can get a job doing baseball statistics and meteorology if they both work out. There's room for that. I don't know. I keep reading online that the metro game area, the games, the Phillies, Yankees, and Mets, they have yet to hire an on-site meteorologist for these rain delays, and it's kind of irking some people. But regardless of that, there's certainly there's places where you can definitely do meteorology and do something else that you enjoy doing, if whether that's baseball or product management or whatever. And I think that's
yeah,
really important to highlight for students and even young career professionals who are just kind of starting out, year one, two, three, four, five, where you don't have to stay to one thing. You can do meteorology, but you can also do something else. It's not, you're not required by law to stay in the field of meteorology just because you went to college for it.
yeah, absolutely. And even more recently, our product portfolio is expanding into looking at more things on the climate timescales. I was again, afforded the opportunity to bring on another product manager to focus on building out a climate portfolio of products now, and being able to sort of lead some of that is yet another sort of fun wrinkle in my kind of career evolution, is going from just leading a product, leading a portfolio, leading other individuals again, like I did one time when once long ago when I led the operations team. So kind of you pick up new things along the way, and yeah, absolutely. You should always be kind of thinking about what comes next. What are the things that will lead you down a path of career growth, and bring you joy in what you do each day. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's see. So just to kind of wrap up this switch here, as I'll call it. So what was the biggest hurdle you encountered when switching from the meteorology side to the business slash product development side, and how did you overcome that hurdle?
yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to a little bit of this before, but I'll kind of point it out one more time, and I think kind of tie it to a little bit of something different. Letting go of forecasting at that point,
Hmm.
I think was probably honestly the biggest challenge. Like I said, you have this kind of weather nerd at heart, but learning how to let go a little bit is a way to find growth. And I've had folks tell me that along the way in my own career, and it's absolutely proven to be true each time. Change can be hard, change can be scary, but change is necessary for growth.
Right.
And I think how I got past that was ultimately trusting that in people and in processes that I may have helped to establish or contributed to in some way, that the next person up would also be able to kick butt in the role that you might be letting go of. So trust and a strong sort of customer and internal relationships kind of helped with that for sure. And sure, I still get some calls from customers somewhere along the way that are like, hey, what's your thoughts on this forecast or that forecast? Generally no. I point those back to the main line, or a certain individual or two that I know and I trust will give them probably a much better answer than I could at this point. So,
Yeah,
so
and I think that's just really important to highlight. Change is part of life, and you kind of have to. It is scary, obviously. Um, if you point out somebody that says change is is not scary, I'll kind of be a little wary of that person.
Yeah,
But no, change, whether it comes in personal life or your career life, it's necessary, and I think that's great that uh, you've highlighted that. And we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to leave all that time for this last question. Uh, Save the best for last. Do you have any advice for students who might be looking into getting into the field of private sector meteorology, either as meteorologist, product developer, or whatever, and
yeah,
or any advice for students in general?
yeah. It's a great question, and I think along the way we've probably hit on a couple of key points already here.
Yeah.
But a couple that I'll kind of come back to. Especially as you start to kind of feel out and become more certain that this weather thing is for you. Seek mentors. There are a lot of really truly great people out there that are more than happy to engage with you. Look on LinkedIn, look on Knowledge Exchange. These are the ways and the opportunities for engagement. Do it. Don't wait for somebody to come find you. Even if it's not even a mentor necessarily, just make connections out there in the world where you seek to be employed someday. And as I kind of mentioned, going way back now, it'll be I think 18 years in the spring. 19 years if you go back to the junior kind of time frame, when I was meeting folks at a job fair that I came back to the next year and was like, hey, remember me? I really liked what you were talking about with your company. I'd love to work there, and those sorts of things can work out. The other piece of advice is, and I think Michael, you actually kind of hit on it at some point here. Recognize either a really good opportunity or a really good situation, or a bad opportunity or a bad situation, and kind of take that for what it is. You do not need to stay in a bad situation. You can learn from it quickly, grow from it, and move on. Though just the same, I do recognize that some folks really just like to kind of hop around a bit more so these days. If you find something that you really, really love, and it appears that it's going to afford you the opportunity for career growth and advancement and things like that, also don't be afraid to stick around with it. I think sometimes it's just kind of like, oh, what's the next big shiny thing? I think for me, and I think of a lot of other folks that have found a home in the private industry that have been able to have long, great careers with kind of regular advancement along the way. And if you find that home where there's really great people and it's a really great company, find a way to grow in there. And don't be ashamed to say that I've worked for the same place for almost 20 years. That's a good thing. As long as it's a good place. Like I said, don't if it's bad, get out of the situation. If it's great, don't be afraid to stick with it. So I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
So
think it's just so important to the mentorship is just such an important factor that people always forget. And there's just so many different places you can look for mentors. I would be shocked to find that there isn't a professor at a university that wouldn't be willing to mentor a student, or somebody on the Knowledge Exchange or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great resource. Pretty much everybody's on LinkedIn.
yep.
You can find anybody, and I'd be surprised if you send to somebody a message on LinkedIn and they say, "Hey, would you mind giving me some career advice?" I'd be shocked if somebody said, "No, I'm not going to give you anything."
Yeah.
You know. Um,
Everybody's willing to give you a couple of minutes of their, or if they're not, they're probably not who you want to talk to anyway. But
yeah.
everybody's generally willing to give you a couple of minutes of their time, answer some of your burning questions. You just have to ask.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so go ask.
Yep.
Go find those folks that
Yeah,
feel like
exactly.
you need to talk to.
Exactly.
So,
All right. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Bob, thank you so much for joining us. I hope our viewers will find your talk as interesting and inspiring as I did. And I really hope we can have you back at some point to talk about other periods of your career and that new climatology product.
yeah.
That sounds interesting. Uh, and for the folks who'd like to talk further with Bob and or perhaps solicit career advice or more career advice, I should say, you can book a meeting with Bob via theknowledgeexchange.com. And while you're on there, there's plenty of other mentors that are volunteering to give their time to you to answer your questions that would be happy to meet and share their knowledge. And finally, we will be posting all of our videos on our YouTube channel, the link of which will be in your MailChimp. And you can also find more info about the Knowledge Exchange on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. And finally, if you have any questions for today's moderator or speaker, you can find us at info@knowledgeexchange.com. Thanks everyone for watching.